Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Podcast Daily. This is Tuesday, and there is not an Ohio State press conference in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Michigan took care of that, as you all know, on Saturday. 45-23 was the score, if you need a reminder. That's Bill Landis, and I'm Austin Ward. But the weekly tradition is still not going to be broken because the season is not over. We're going to pretend as if there was a Tuesday press conference because I still wrote my Monday 5 questions for the Buckeyes. I think I could have probably written 500. And so I'm curious how many of those 500 match up with what's on Bill's mind right now for Ohio State. I know he covered a lot of ground in the rewatch on Monday, but there's even more on his mind about just where the Buckeyes go from here, which I'm calling purgatory this week because they have no idea if they can start planning for the future or not.
Yeah, that's the hard thing here. Like I think there's a playoff conversation that I think we need to have on this episode, but we can table it because I don't think Ohio State fans are particularly interested in it. But it is important. I think they're probably more interested in the bigger picture, and then they'll recalibrate to the playoff should that opportunity arise. So I guess let's start with the bigger picture, long term stuff.
Okay.
Last year's loss to Michigan forced Ryan Day to take, maybe that's wrong. I was going to say forced Ryan Day to take a long, hard look at the defense, but he was already doing that. Michigan was just sort of the last straw.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder now what this game does for the offense. Because on one hand, they're the number 2 scoring offense in the country. They're, I think, number 6 in total offense. Like, they're still, by many metrics, one of the best offenses in the country. But in the last 2 years against Michigan, they have 5 touchdowns and 5 field goals. And Michigan has 12 touchdowns and 1 field goal. And that is clearly not good enough. Some of that is on the defense, very clearly, obviously. We'll talk about that here too. But where does this leave Ryan Day now in sort of assessing the structure of his offense, the procedure of his offense? Where does it leave him in terms of still wanting to be the play caller, or perhaps giving some of that up, or all of it up? I don't know where he lands on that, but that is probably the biggest thing in my mind right now is where does the offense go from here? Because for, 10 weeks out of the season, it's perfectly fine. But in the game that matters the most, it has not been up to snuff the last 2 years. And you cannot expect to beat Michigan when you're settling for field goals and they're scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, if this previous offseason was all about the defense, which it was, and understandably and justifiably so, I think this next one has to be the spotlight on the offense. There's just no way around it. And people will say, well, is Jim Knowles the answer? He gave up 45 points. Think about how differently Saturday would have looked if Ohio State had cashed in the numerous chances that Michigan gave it in the first half, whether that was pushing it to 17-3 or more, 4th and 2 getting away, opportunities later on with the Emeka Egbuka and the screen. This is not to rewrite the game or say that Ohio State should have won. The opportunities were there, and I think it would have looked dramatically different, and that Michigan, if that crowd was energized and they were down 2 scores and they had to throw, and then maybe the pass rush roars to life for Ohio State, whatever. This is all purely hypothetical, but my point is that the reason that the game wound up getting away from Ohio State in the second half was that the offense did not put it away in the first half. And why is that? There's been inconsistency, and maybe that's not even the right word. They've been consistent with the play calling. It's just been too predictable. The running game you've talked about all year, nobody, I think, has broken that down any better with the issues that popped up there with, the number of times under center or out of the pistol or into the boundary, all those things that you've broken down. So I think the question becomes then if Ryan Day is not seeing or feeling the game the same way from the sideline, if it helps. A lot of people have asked us oh, this is all collaborative. Like Kevin Wilson already has an impact. The truth is that during a game, he does not. So, and I think that people also saw a reminder of that on the sideline when Brian Hartline wanted to have a word maybe with Ryan Day that was caught on the broadcast cameras. That in itself is not a big deal. I think it's just a reminder that he gets on the headset and is trying to call plays, and he's not really looking for input once they get into the game. And I don't think that approach personally, I don't think it's working. The only one who can answer that for sure is Ryan Day. And where's he going to land on that? I don't know. He has hinted privately in the past, conversations with me and Berm, that it's something that he would consider down the road. Um, Maybe that road was shorter than he imagined.
Yeah, I kind of talked about that with Berm on the Monday Daily, so I guess I won't repeat everything I said there, but I think generally there comes a time where most head coaches who like to call plays, I think, sort of face this crossroads, and some probably stick with it. I'm sure, like Chip Kelly, a time or two has thought, like, should I keep doing this? And he's always called plays. Lincoln Riley, I'm sure we'll try to call plays until he's done coaching, and maybe Ryan will too. Like, I don't know, he's the head coach; it's his prerogative. Like, I don't know. I don't know if I'm in a position to tell him what's right and what's wrong, but it seems like
Right.
there is there's more on the plate of these guys than there ever has been. It's a hard job. They're well compensated for it, but it's a hard job. And I found myself increasingly wondering if everything that's required of a head coach right now leaves someone like Ryan Day in the best position to also have to call the plays. Like, it's a really important job. Some weeks it's whatever. It's like you're playing Madden and you can try whatever you want. It's going to work because you're that much better than the team you're playing against. But in the games where the talent has been equal or close to it, I have found it to be lacking, or maybe just sort of clunky, or not really cohesive. What they're doing out there, just like the feel is the word we keep saying. That just seems there's a feel lacking, and I think part of that is probably because Ryan Day is on some level distracted. I don't know if distracted is the right word, but there's just a lot there in his brain, and there's only so much bandwidth I think a person has, and it feels like maybe that particular area, calling plays, is getting away from him a little bit. So, but then I don't know what the solution is. Like, I suppose the easy solution is Kevin Wilson because he's in house. But I could also be convinced that maybe they need some new blood in there and some outside ideas, because even like the Justin Fry hire that I really liked. I think Justin Fry's a good offensive line coach. He and Ryan Day more or less come from the same coaching tree. I don't know how much like diversity of ideas there is there with bringing a guy like Justin Fry in. Maybe it could be beneficial to have someone who's not from the Chip Kelly tree come in here and bring some new ideas. And even if they're not the play caller, help revamp this thing a little bit.
I was trying to run through my brain and just thinking from the years that I've covered Ohio State or in the playoff era, like, is anybody having success wearing both hats? And because somebody asked on Saturday, well, how does Lincoln Riley do it? Well, he doesn't. He has a reputation for not winning big games. Maybe that will change this year. So are there other head coaches who are offensive play callers who are able to get it done at the very highest level and win national championships? And I'm just trying to run through the list. Like, Tom Herman was doing that in 2014. Ed Ogeron didn't do that for LSU. Obviously Clemson wasn't having Dabo call plays for their championships. Nick Saban wasn't doing that. Now, some of these guys like Kirby or Nick Saban may have their hands more involved in the defense, but I don't really know the intimate workings of their programs, but I don't think that they are primary exclusive play callers for their defense. But even if they are, that's still a little bit different than offense in my mind. So Chip Kelly, Lincoln Riley, Ryan Day, let's throw those guys are probably the most famous for doing it at this level. There's not a national championship amongst that bunch that I'm aware
There's
of.
not. Yeah, I think maybe unless I'm forgetting someone, I think probably the last head coach that was the primary offensive play caller to win a national title was Jimbo Fisher at Florida State, right?
Yeah.
In 2013, that was. So, yeah, it's
Offensive
rare.
legend Jimbo Fisher.
That's right. Yeah, he's in a great spot right now with what that offense is doing. It's hard. It's I think when you take over as head coach, like the way that Ryan Day did, you don't want to give up the play calling because the play calling is fun. And like, I totally respect that. I had a conversation with him about that at the Rose Bowl in 2018, and Urban Meyer as well. Urban Meyer, like, I think at times has been a play caller, but maybe not quite in the traditional sense. But certainly in some years was heavily involved in the play calling procedure, and in those years, like, the offense didn't look that good.
Yeah.
And I think Urban on some level knew that it was best for him to be more hands off than not. And I think Ryan Day, listen, he's only been a head coach for 4 years. There was going to be some learning on the job here, and maybe the conversation we're having is one that he is not particularly interested in, and he's going to keep calling the plays because he doesn't think anything is wrong. But I also wonder, and I like, this week would probably not be the best time to like try to get him to be introspective about that if there were a press conference this week. But after like the dust settled and we got like into the off season, I would be curious of where his mind is with that, because it does feel like the offense requires a pretty thorough look over right now.
Yeah, and I think at some point, if there isn't more responsibility given to the rest of that staff, like they're very well compensated, but why would they want to be
Hmm.
part of that if it's always going to be Ryan Day's show? I mean, Kevin Wilson is one of the most innovative offensive minds. If you ask around this profession, Kevin Wilson's creativity and the points that he squeezed out of Indiana year in and year out without anywhere near the personnel, he is very highly thought of around college football. I don't see how there's any reason that Ohio State's offense would be um, in the wrong hands if Kevin Wilson was calling plays. But again, that's not my decision. So that's certainly one of the questions that we're going to be looking at, no matter what. What else is on your mind, Bill?
Where the defense goes from here, sort of philosophically, because um, bringing in Jim Knowles was a pretty dramatic shift from what Ohio State had done previously. And up until this point, I had been like pretty like, and not that I guess my opinion matters, but I had been pretty okay with the amount of big plays they give up because I saw the trade off there. Ohio State's defensive players played faster, played more decisive, played with more energy because they knew that they were playing for an aggressive defensive coordinator. And I think the statistical improvement we saw from this defense was a byproduct of that on some level. But
Mm-hmm.
I think there is a time where you find yourself maybe pushing the envelope a little too much, and I think Jim Knowles did that against Michigan. Um, his decision to blitz J.J. McCarthy on that first long touchdown pass, I found to be quite baffling considering the state of the game at that time. That kind of brought Michigan back into the game, and then he did it again in the third quarter on Michigan's first drive that ended up being their decisive touchdown. They took the lead there and then didn't trail for the rest of the game. And I just don't know if being that aggressive against that particular quarterback, against that offense that seemed like it was in a pretty good place in terms of having its finger on the pulse of what Ohio State was going to try to do. And I think Michigan had that on both sides of the ball on Saturday, especially in the second half. It just felt to me like a little bit of a miscalculation. And I know that Ryan Day sort of brought Jim Knowles in to kind of run his own ship and do his own thing and not have to worry about the defense very much. But there probably needs to be some hard conversations now about time and place with that kind of stuff, because it burned them in a major way on Saturday. And I wonder if Ryan Day might try to alter that philosophy a little bit.
Yeah, I would say time, place, and personnel as well. And
Yeah.
not even going to talk about who may or may not have been out there on the field on the defensive line. This is about the secondary and a safety-driven defense that Jim Knowles wanted to put out there. And that's what I thought was more problematic, I guess, on Saturday than even the blitzes. Like, I mean, they go hand in hand. If you're going to blitz, you're going to have to accept the risk, but you have to know that whoever's back there is able to clean it up and get a guy on the ground. And I think that for whatever reason, we've talked about the corners, and I don't think enough attention was paid to some of the issues that, like Ronnie Hickman, for the last month of this season, I thought early on he was assignment sound. In September, he was perfect. NFL scouts were raving. There was a decline in his play late in the year. I don't know why. I don't think that his physicality changed, his athleticism changed, his knowledge of the game. I don't think that changed. Lathan Ransom is an aggressive playmaker, and Jim Knowles wanted to turn him loose, but sometimes he was way too aggressive, whether that was angles, missing tackles. He was also hurt with the broken thumb. That hurt. Cameron Martinez was out there and got hit by the double move. The cornerback stuff, I think I'm chalking that up to only having 6 scholarship guys and 3 of them being hurt for most of the season, or parts, all of training camp, parts of the season, and then Cameron Brown being hurt for the second half. Certainly didn't help. But if you're gonna be that aggressive, you're not taking into account who's back there right now, that maybe they're not equipped to do that. That's the problem. Like, I don't think Jim Knowles ever going to say, I'm going to stop blitzing at this amount or pressing the issue. But it was also still year one for a bunch of these guys, and maybe we were missing some of the growing pains in that system where Tanner McAllister was the only one who had been in it before and knew what to do.
That's probably fair. And I likewise like I don't think Jim Knowles like should change who he is. I wonder if Ryan Day might ask him to ratchet it back a little bit, but I'm not so sure that's the right course of action. I think you maybe have to kind of live with the result you got against Michigan, but also understand the bigger picture here, and it takes time for the system to take hold and the players to grow in it. Um, with the benefit of hindsight, there probably are moments you can look back over the course of the year where we were probably talking about the safety position in general, sort of in outsized terms, and maybe it wasn't quite as good as we thought it was. I do think Ronnie Hickman's play dropped a little bit. Lathan Ransom's play did, and he probably played his worst game against Michigan. I wonder if part of that is like we heard all year, like we have more for the safeties. We have more for the safeties. We haven't had to use it yet. And then we saw them sort of incrementally use it over the last couple of weeks. And I wonder maybe if that altered the mindset of that position group at all, because those guys were hyper aggressive
Yeah.
and to the detriment of the defense at times. So maybe there's a learning moment, teachable moment there for Jim Knowles in terms of how he implements things and builds up to things. But I don't look at the defense like, oh, this one doesn't work either. Like I think the Jim Knowles hire was still a good one. Like I like Jim Knowles. I think he's a smart guy. I think he got bested in this particular game, and maybe there's things to learn from that. But I think it's probably more personnel driven than anything, which sort of like leads me to my third big question here is, and this is, I guess, if they're going to the playoff, they put them on the back burner, but where do they look for upgrades, or do they look for upgrades, especially in the secondary? With the like, Ronnie Hickman's going to go to the NFL. Cameron Brown is gone. We don't know what Lathan Ransom's going to do, but he could leave if he wanted to. Josh Proctor walked on senior day. Court Williams has been hurt his entire career. Like there's a lot of question marks there. Tanner McAllister's gone. Thank you. So like the balance there between looking for guys in the portal, and I know they have a lot of recruits they feel really good about, but can you be patient and wait for those recruits to develop, or do you need to be more aggressive in the portal than you have been over the last couple of years when you're addressing secondary needs?
Yeah, that's they can't really wait on that one, which is a bizarre turn. Whether they're in the playoff or not, the portal is going to open next week, right? December 5th. Guys are going in, and then you have the early signing period. Like, even if they are playing in the playoff, they're going to have to make some of these decisions about their roster before they would really want to, because the risk is if you don't, somebody offers them $1 million and they're out of the portal before your guys have decided if they're going to the NFL or not. Like we get asked a lot at OhioState.Rivals.com about, where Ohio State should look for the portal. So could they get a tight end? Well, Cade Stover's probably going to come back. He could go. And if you don't have him, then the situation becomes a lot more pressing to try and get something done there, because then you're looking at Joe Royer coming off injuries and unproven, and G. Scott doing whatever the hell goes through his mind on a given play. So that's not Mitch Rossi's going to be gone. Like, that's not an ideal situation. That's probably somewhere you'd have to look.
Yep.
Paris Johnson and DeJuan Jones, if they're both gone, what Josh Fryer can do out there. He's going to probably take one of those tackles. How does Ohio State feel about the depth there? Do they need to pursue a portal option at left tackle? Like, you can make the beginnings of a shopping list for Ohio State, but you can't make the full one. And you can still come back and do that later on. There's another window in May, but then you miss spring ball, and this calendar has become so complicated. And in a lot of ways, like, as Ohio State, I can't get my mind around the fact that they could be playing for a national championship after what happened on Saturday.
I know, it's weird.
It'd be great, like, for them if they got a chance to play and get revenge against Michigan, and that opportunity it very much exists. Like, I am still dismissive of the fact that I don't think Ohio State deserves it after what happened and not winning the Big Ten, but they may get it anyway. That we can talk about that later on, but I almost feel like last year's situation, having a resolution right away that you have to get ready now for 2022 after what happened in the Big House, help them make those changes. Now, it didn't ultimately change the outcome on last Saturday in the Horseshoe, but I think for a program that is measuring itself by beating Michigan and winning the Big Ten, which it did not do this year, that like turning the page and not having to psych itself back up to play Georgia or get revenge, like I think that's going to be hard. And I don't know that they deep down really want to. So I almost feel like it's better for them to start making those moves, to get into the portal, to finish the signing class, to make any coaching moves that they feel are necessary or coming potentially with a retirement or what, or I mean, even other schools that are going to be pursuing somebody like Brian Hartline at Cincinnati, for example. I almost feel like that's better for Ryan Day and for Ohio State. And that sounds stupid because guys don't get a lot of opportunities to play for a national championship, but that's how I feel.
It's an odd feeling. Because I can certainly see that perspective, and there are probably members of the fan base who probably feel the same way. I am of the mind that if they're going to give you a shot at winning a national title, you take it.
You're definitely right about that. You're definitely
right. And you try your damnedest to win the thing. And listen, like Ohio State's best is really good. I don't know if we've seen it this year, but if they can find it, it can win a national championship. So, and I'm not here to like convince people of that. I know they don't care about that at the moment, but
right.
It's almost like an early kind of foray into what is going to be the reality in a year or two. Like, 2 years from now, if they would have lost that game, they would have just played Michigan again on Saturday.
Yeah.
Like this, which is weird. Like 3 years from now, they're going to still be in the playoffs. So I guess there's useful experience to be gained through this process, but it is weird knowing that that's still out there when, like, on the other hand, like CJ Stroud is the podium post game after losing to Michigan, like effectively saying goodbye. Like that was a farewell press conference. It felt like, and not to say that he's checked out. It was just like he knew that was his last game in the shoe, no matter what, and he didn't know what was to come, and like he wanted to say thank you in case he didn't get the opportunity to do it again.
Yeah.
And so that and now it's like, hey, just kidding, you're gonna go play Georgia in the Peach Bowl in 3 weeks. Like that would be an odd recalibration for a program to make at the moment. But you're right in the sense that no matter what happens, these kind of personnel decisions need to be addressed, either way. And there are a lot of them. You can convince yourself that it's a laundry list if you really wanted to. I'm not so sure Ohio State would be that aggressive in the portal, but losing to Michigan twice and coming up short of the playoff twice, if that's the case, maybe forces you into being more aggressive too. So I'm curious to see how that plays out for them.
I want to stress that you are absolutely right. You don't turn down an opportunity to play for a national championship, and the Buckeyes would leap at the opportunity. It's more so that I feel like the benefits for moving to 2023 probably maybe it's just a silver lining. May I just say it that way? Like I just think that it may be what's best for the program instead of trying to get everybody back together this week is going to be bizarre for them. They don't know what comes next, and I didn't even really write this on Monday, but like what are they supposed to do? Like go have normal workouts and meetings as if they're going to play Georgia? I mean, you want them to have a week off and recover and lick their wounds? Like I don't know what the best way to use this time is because they don't know where they're going or what they're going to do.
I think probably the best use of their time would be to like chill out and like let the emotions settle a little bit, and then sort of would take what comes their way, because and you can, I don't know, it's not all that outlandish to think that they could find themselves in a position where they have to play Michigan again in their next game. Say like I don't think Michigan will be number one on Tuesday, or Tuesday night, but I think they could be. And if Georgia loses to LSU, which is probably unlikely, but not impossible, and Michigan beats Purdue, Michigan will be number one. And if Ohio State's in the playoff, it's the 4 seed. So, like, we're going to see Ohio State play Michigan in the Fiesta Bowl? I have no idea. It's probably more likely that if they do get in, they'll be against Georgia as the 4 seed in Atlanta. And honestly, it kind of just feels like it comes down to USC. Like, I think if USC loses, Ohio State's in. I don't know, maybe you disagree with that, but I think that's the position Ohio State finds itself in right now.
Yeah, I think if either one loses, Ohio State is probably going to get in. And the only reason that I've come to that conclusion is that Ohio State and TCU were undefeated all year until last week, and the committee clearly favored Ohio State over TCU.
Mhm.
And it for most of the year, the committee wanted to find anybody other than TCU that they could put up there until they no longer had any options. So I understand that people feel that programs that are in a conference championship shouldn't be able to play themselves out. Um, I I don't have a strong counter argument to it other than they have to play another game, and the committee felt like Ohio State was better, comparing them head to head throughout the regular season, and their loss was to a team much better than Kansas State. So I think that either way, either loss could help Ohio State get in. Probably would. That part is difficult for me to wrap my mind around. Um, I guess we get to find out one day sooner, right? Because the Pac-12 wants to play their championship game
Yeah,
on a
Friday
Friday
night.
night. So I don't know. I definitely would prefer not to go to the Rose Bowl again. I will just say that selfishly for myself. So if one of those teams wants to do that, I will try and psych myself back up to cover the playoff, which I thought all year that that's what I would be doing.
It'll be a weird thing if that happens, and I guess I have not paid any attention whatsoever to the playoff ranking show this year. I will be watching on Tuesday night to see if USC is ahead of Ohio State. They're both one-loss teams. Ohio State has a better win. They both beat Notre Dame by the same margin. I think there's a strong case for Ohio State to still be number 4 and USC to be number 5. And if that's the case, then like we're in business because then it's like it's pretty clear that if the USC loses, Ohio State's in. If USC is ahead of them, then maybe you do encounter that argument of like, are you going to penalize a team for playing out of the playoff and conference championship weekend? I think that's a more nuanced discussion, but it doesn't come into play, I think, if Ohio State is 4 and USC is 5. So I'm fascinated to see how that plays out on Tuesday night.
So we will do. It will not. Will the Wednesday Daily will address the playoff committee rankings. We will get into that this week. I haven't felt the need to previously because it was a pretty cut and dry conversation, and I would have just ripped on all the insanity of a made-for-TV event, which now suddenly does apply to Ohio State this week. I hope they just make it easy and don't get like, the only thing that I'm on alert for is mainly just to shut up all the people that think Alabama has a path to the playoff. Just as long as the committee puts Ohio State ahead of Alabama on Tuesday night, that's really all I care about. Because there's no justification in the world that supports putting the 2-loss Crimson Tide ahead of Ohio State at this point. But if they do that this week, then there's no point in any other conversation because
Right.
Ohio State, there's no case for them to get ahead of that. So hypothetically talking about these rankings makes my head hurt even more than anything else we could possibly do. But we will come back and break down the real ones on Wednesday. This, of course, has been the podcast daily for Tuesday. Don't have a press conference to go to in the Woody this week, so we just had to pretend. And I think the next time that we will speak to them is Sunday during or after the selection show at Ohio State, but we'll still have full coverage of the Buckeyes and fallout from the game, both here and at ohiostate.rivals.com. That is Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. We will see you tomorrow.